Convention after a citizen oversight commission directed police in the city to stop using tear gas to control crowds. The directive enacted in response to criticism of police tactics during protests in Portland, Oregon, and other cities. Chief Alfonso Morales says the plan was to bring in 1,000 officers from outside agencies to assist with security at next month's convention. The DNC going mostly virtual because of the coronavirus pandemic, with only about 300 people expected to attend in person, but police are preparing for the possibility of large protests. Steve Rappaport, Fox News.
Who's to blame for sharply rising crime rates in New York City? Former Mayor Rudy Giuliani tells the Fox News Rundown podcast it's Mayor Bill de Blasio.
Instead of adding police, he's added criminals. He already had too few police and too many criminals. Plus, the governor passed a no-bail law, which means that when the police arrest somebody, they're back out on the street within 4 or 5 hours. So they have contributed directly to the out-of-control situation that we have.
Listen to the full interview at foxnewspodcasts.com. Spirit Airlines plans to tell its unions Friday that 20 to 30% of its workers could be furloughed in October. An internal memo blames sagging airline business because of the coronavirus. Tropical storm warnings have been posted from the Leeward Islands to Puerto Rico. A tropical disturbance likely to reach tropical storm strength on Wednesday. Current projections say that storm could hit South Florida by Saturday night. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
You've got a job to do. Having the right equipment for the job is critical, and East West Rental has the exact tools you need. Get it done faster with the right stuff, whether it's landscaping tools, concrete tools, lifts, trucks, lights, generators, trench boxes, welders, tents, tables, and chairs. They're here to help you tackle any project you're working on, big or small. Open Monday to Saturday, 7 to 5, closed Sundays. Find what you're looking for at East West Rental Center in Upper Tumont or call 646-1463.
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile team, conveniently located at the East West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumont. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3. Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Hagåtña is taking your local favorite dishes and serve them with extra flair. Mezcla is ready to serve you and your family for your dine-in experience and takeout services. To ensure everyone's safety and comfort, Team Mezcla has taken further steps in maintaining a clean and sanitized area for you and your family while dining in. For more information, please call 479-2652 or 479-2653. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 66 years. Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is also brought to you by Security Title, providing solutions for complex real estate transactions.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Starts the program every day. This is a program that is oriented towards the Bill of Rights, the United States Constitution, individual freedom, motherhood, apple pie, and the American flag. So let's go from here straight to Zemi Ikotny. And you'll recall that this is that part of the program where I look at the opinion pages of both of our daily newspapers, try to find an editorial on the page, preferably an editorial that deals with local issues. Having found same, I will read it responsively, pointing out such errors in English usage and grammar as meet my eye. also evaluating the theory of the editorial and its factual accuracy. Having completed those tasks, I will then grab my blue pencil and give the better of the two editorials the coveted blue star. That's the way it goes under normal circumstances. Normal circumstances nowadays are that the Daily News doesn't want to play. They never run local editorials. They have 55, historically 57 blue stars, but it's been a couple months since they've got one because they don't publish local editorials. They get stuff from the Gannett News Service, boilerplate from USA Today, and run it on the editorial page, I suppose thinking we won't notice that it's not a local editorial. Well, I notice, and today is no exception. Special to USA Today. Why neglected national parks may soon get aid. Well, it's wonderful. You know, I like national parks. I might even get a chance to visit one again someday when this Wuhan virus thing cools off. But somehow it's not top of the mind awareness for me. I'm much more interested in what's going on right here in our little bit of paradise in the Western Pacific. I therefore always turn to the Guam Daily Post for their editorial renderings because they are always writing about local stuff, usually right on point, and oftentimes with a degree of smack in their editorials. I mean, sometimes they smack that ball right out of the park. Yesterday, unfortunately for the Post, was not one of those days. Yesterday, the Post set a new record. It got a 0 for its editorial offering because it was dead wrong on an important point. The Post editorialized that it's about time that Congress reimbursed Guam for the earned income tax credit payments that Guam was making, like it does with the states. And that was just dead wrong. The government doesn't reimburse the states for EITC payments because states don't make EITC payments. And I went into that chapter and verse, and the Post was just dead wrong. It was very disappointing to see them fall so hard as they did. But, you know, fair is fair. Mark pointed out to me that the blue star can never go by default. So even though the Daily News doesn't run an editorial, the Post must show some merit to get a blue star. Well, yesterday, no merit, demerits. As a matter of fact, if I had used the same mathematics that we use for the earned income tax credit, I would have given the Post a grade lower than 0. Just like the earned income tax credit allows for a payment to a taxpayer that is less than his tax liability. Anyhow, let's bring it up to today. Guam's tourism industry needs to look to Hawaii's. Hawaii has won a breakthrough in the race to reopen to tourists from Japan. The Aloha State's Governor David Ige shared Tuesday that Japan Prime Minister Shinzo Abe announced the inclusion of Hawaii in an exclusive list of destinations that are being considered to resume safe international travel with Japan. The Japan government announced the first 12 destinations that are being considered in the near future for international travel from Japan, with Europe and Hawaii to follow in the next step, Ige stated. Hawaii is the only United States destination to make the cut. Other destinations Japan is considering discussions with include Brunei, Cambodia, China, Hong Kong, Macau, Laos, Malaysia, Mongolia, Myanmar. I don't recognize a country named Myanmar. If you want to talk about Burma, we'll talk about Burma. I never heard of a company called Myanmar Shave. Have you, Real Joe Cruz?
No, sir.
And when I was a kid driving around the United States, I don't ever remember seeing red and white signs along the highway that had clever votes, as you were clever verses, and then at the end there was a sign that said, Myanmar shave.
No.
Yeah. So I don't recognize any we don't need no stinking Myanmar here. South Korea, Singapore, and Taiwan, and this kind of goes back to what I was prophesying a few weeks ago. I said my analysis is that I don't think we're ever going to get back to, quote, normal, unquote. So we can't be thinking that this is a plan. The plan can't be, well, as soon as we get back to normal, we'll do this, that, and the other thing, because I don't think we're going to get back to normal. And the reason that I don't think we're going to get back to normal is that even when the world is over this Wuhan virus thing, when we are virus-free, Japan is virus-free, I don't think it follows that Japanese are going to say, okay, let's go back and do what we've always been doing. Let's go to Guam. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's more likely that places like Brunei, Cambodia, China, Malaysia, Laos, etc., Singapore, Taiwan are going to be very attractive to the Japanese, and they're going to go there. The fact that they're beating us to the punch on the Wuhan virus doesn't help us at all. Going back to the editorial in the Post, Governor Ige, in a press release, noted that details for the Japan-Hawaii Safe Travel Program are still being resolved, and no timetable has been set for when it would take effect. The governor stressed that public health will be the overriding factor in determining how the program is carried out to support the state's economic recovery and the tens of thousands of residents who depend on the travel industry for their livelihoods. Guam can look to Hawaii's progress with a Japan visitor market as model for regaining the confidence of the Japanese to resume their Guam visits sooner rather than later. Well, we hope. The Japan market has been a solid source of visitors for Guam for decades, up until March, when Wuhan virus stopped international tourist arrivals to Guam. Governor Ige has decided recently to keep the mandatory 14-day quarantine in effect for travelers entering Hawaii and to continue a mandatory screening process at the state's international airport. Hawaii has also announced plans to offer a pre-travel testing option currently scheduled to begin September 1. We are getting closer to the point where travel between Japan and Hawaii can be restored while staying focused on protecting people's health. Hawaii House Speaker Scott Saiki said in a joint statement with Governor Ige. Saiki was instrumental in Hawaii being included on Japan's list of travel destinations through his discussions with Japan's top policymakers as the chair of the Japan-Hawaii Legislators Friendship Association. A combination of gaining Japan's confidence in health safety measures and some efforts on establishing goodwill in challenging time has paid off for Hawaii. It also helps that Japan's Prime Minister has visited Hawaii in 2016 and 2018. Guam can look to Hawaii to see what has made Japan feel confident in the health and safety measures that are in place. Guam and Hawaii are competing for tourists, but Guam does have the edge of shorter flight time. There must be something Guam can do to be on the next safe travel destination list coming out of Japan. For Japanese travelers, being cooped up in a shorter flight to Guam plays to their comfort level. There's no reason why Guam can't be on Japan's next preferred list of destinations. Fair editorial, not a blue star type. But let's go back to it. Good news for Hawaii is actually bad news for Guam because they are part of our competition. There are some very cheap flights from Japan to Hawaii. We don't necessarily have the advantage of cheaper flights. Shorter flights, yeah. Cheaper, not necessarily so. And of course, Hawaii has an awful lot to offer, and it's very Japanese tourist friendly. So, as I said earlier, I don't think it necessarily follows when we're not playing the Wuhan virus card anymore. The Japanese tourists are going to come flooding back to Guam. Be nice if it happened, but I don't know if it will. I think I have an interesting email here that I want to read. Hang on just a second. No, I thought I did, but not so. Okay. So let's go on to the next part of the program. Then we finished Zemi Ikatni. Let's go on to the card. And today on the card, I have Troy versus Janela. It's 70 days now since Crystal Paco came out with her Janela proclamation that Janela did not have to apologize to nobody because Carlo Branch's apology was sufficient, but that Janela would not be Janela-ing anybody in the future. Janela being a term of art, meaning muting their microphones and cutting them off in mid-question when they're trying to question the governor. I did peek in into my crystal ball last night, though, and although the crystal ball was foggy, I see a possible change in undertaking for Janela coming up. But, of course, the crystal ball wasn't able to speak to me because when the crystal ball was about to speak, guess what happened to my crystal ball, Real Joe Cruz?
What, sir?
It got Janella'd.
Uh-oh.
Uh-huh. So, yeah, no place on the island is safe from being Janella'd. All right. Tina, on the other hand, has gone 23 days now in assuring us of relative safety. She has not seen anything for 23 days that impacts on the safety or health of the people of Guam. She has therefore not called the legislature into special session, nor has she waived the public hearing requirement for bills coming before the legislature. So we should all feel pretty good. 23 days and no emergencies. That's quite an accomplishment. Going on from there, I have Chicago versus systemic racism on the card. I've got Neil Weir versus Guam, which was on the card earlier, is RU versus Fudge, plus Souter, plus Rube Goldberg. Real Joe Cruz is still waiting for my explanation of Rube Goldberg, aren't you, Real Joe Cruz?
No, I remember what you were telling me before about it.
You remember?
It's a full setup and from one thing to the next, and then at the end it does something spectacular.
But you didn't know how that related to the subject of RU versus Fudge, right? So I will explain that a little later on. Okay, I've got Commissioner Guthertz versus Patrick Lujan. I've got Aline Yamashita versus Thomas Kreis. Nelson versus Shelton. That's Senator Nelson versus Senator Shelton. I've got Guam taxpayers versus the Earned Income Tax Credit. I may not get to that today. I will spend, sooner or later, I will spend some time on it because after I have finished, you will be convinced that there's no good reason for us to be paying the Earned Income Tax Credit. No good reason at all. and that therefore we should stop paying it. Now, when I say that, I'm not talking about applying the credit to tax liability, which is what a tax credit does, but that element of the earned income tax credit that allows a tax credit to someone in an amount greater than his tax liability. So after he files his 1040, he not only doesn't owe any taxes, the government owes him money. And that's where most of our tax refunds are coming from. So if you are patient and you wait till I get to it, I'm going to show you why we don't have to pay the earned income tax credit, that, you know, the check to the taxpayer part of it, and why we should stop doing it. Next item on the card is Nicole Hannah Jones versus journalism. Nicole Hannah Jones works for the New York Times, which at one time was a newspaper. It's not anymore. It still comes out in the form of paper. But news is not correct. As a matter of fact, I understand that there's a movement amongst the Times management to change the name from the New York Times to the New York edition of Pravda. Do you remember Pravda, Real Joe Cruz?
No, sir.
Pravda is the Russian word for truth. That kind of tells you everything you need to know about a newspaper called Pravda, right? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I'll get into that. I may not get there today, but it's an item that is not perishable, so I will get to it sooner or later. So let's go to the top of the card. That's systemic racism versus Chicago. I'm going to just read a list of public officials in Chicago, and then I'm going to ask you what they all have in common, since the mayor of Chicago and a lot of other folks have been talking about the United States is a bad country. Systemic racism. Systemic racism. Chicago, systemic racism. Since the unfortunate demise of George Floyd, it's almost politically incorrect to talk about anything without using the phrase systemic racism somewhere in your speech. So here it goes. There were 1,595 shootings between January and June in 2020, all right? Almost every shooter was black, as were almost all of the victims. Now, I'm going to ask you about these public officials and see if you can tell me what they all have in common. The Chicago mayor, the superintendent of police, the Cook County State's attorney, the chief judge of Cook County Circuit Courts, the Illinois Attorney General, the Chicago Fire Department Commissioner, the Cook County Board President, the State Senate Majority Leader, the Illinois Lieutenant Governor, the Illinois Secretary of State, the Clerk of the Circuit Court of Cook County, the Cook County Clerk, the Chicago Treasurer, the City Treasurer, the Chicago Police Board President, the Chicago Transit Authority President, the Chief Executive Officer of Chicago Public Schools, the Commissioner of the Department of Water Management in Chicago, and 40% of the City Council of Chicago. What do you think all of those people have in common, Real Joe Cruz?
They all have poop for brains, sir?
Well, I hadn't thought of that, but you're right, yeah. Okay. An interesting observation. I'll tell you the answer. Every one of those people is an African American.
Oh, okay.
Everyone is black. And I suppose they spend a fair amount of their time. Let's see, how many public officials was that? That's 18 key public officials in Chicago who I suppose get together on a weekly basis over lunch to discuss systemic racism in Chicago and how badly it has debilitated the system. So, you know, when you hear terms like systemic racism, just remember what it means in Chicago. I have something else kind of on the same subject. This is about Kamala Harris, and I've seen some stuff on the internet kind of trying to scoop Joe Biden, saying that he has chosen, I must pronounce her name correctly, Kamala Harris to be his vice president candidate. And this article I have here says that Kamala shredded Attorney General William Barr for mentioning the late John Lewis during the opening remarks of Barr's testimony before the House Judiciary Committee hearing. At the hearing on Tuesday, Barr opened by saying, "On behalf of the Department of Justice, I want to pay my respects to your colleague, John Lewis," who was a member of the House, "an indomitable champion of civil rights and the rule of law," as he praised his commitment to nonviolence. In response to Barr's remarks, the California lawmaker, that's Harris, took to Twitter to blast the Attorney General as she noted what Lewis advocated for during his time in office. For more than 40 years, Lewis fought for fair voting rights for minorities. Harris tweeted, "Bill Barr hasn't lifted a finger as Attorney General to protect voting rights in America. He has no business speaking John Lewis's name." A special form of cancellation. In a separate tweet, Harris said, "Bill Barr's testimony shows us he's only here to protect the president and his re-election. That's it." Other Democrat lawmakers waved in with their reactions to Barr's opening remarks. Representative Cedric Richmond, a Democrat from Louisiana, reacted to Barr's comments. And this is what Cedric Richmond said, quote, "Attorney General Barr, you started your testimony with eloquent words about the life and agency of John Lewis." Now listen to this carefully. "The life and legacy of John Lewis fighting systematic racism, voter intimidation, civil rights." Richmond said, I don't give people the benefit of the doubt, but I'm going to use my powers as the magic editor here on Tall Tales to edit those remarks and change systematic to systemic, because systematic doesn't make any sense in that sentence. Okay. Richmond goes on to say, the one thing that you have in common with your two predecessors, both Attorney General Sessions and Attorney General Whitaker, is that when you all came here and brought your top staff, you brought no black people," Richmond continued, adding, "That, sir, is systematic racism." Now, if that's systematic racism, let's come back to systematic racism right after this break.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Woo-wee! Just take a gander at them tender and juicy fall-off-the-bone St. Louis ribs. Heavens to Betsy. What is their secret? It's bursting with so much flavor. I can eat them all day long. Come see for yourself, y'all. These fine slabs of hunky-dory, mouth-watering ribs are only available at Circle K. Circle K. Take it easy.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Horizon Properties, doing real estate since 1978. 14 years here on Guam. Call Maria Miller from Horizon Properties at 777-7792.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So here we are, back on Tall Tales with Kamala Harris and Representative, what was his name? Representative Richmond, who said, you know, the last three attorney general that came and testified before the Judiciary Committee brought their top staff along, and none of them were African Americans. And he said, later on, he goes on to say, I would just suggest that actions speak louder than words, and really, you really should keep the name of the Honorable John Lewis out of the Department of Justice's mouth. So this is the world that some of us live in and would want all of us to live in. And it appears, going back to 1954, the United States Supreme Court decided a case called Brown versus Board of Education. And the one-sentence explanation of that case was no more segregation. It said separate but equal is on its face unequal. But it looks like there are people in the United States who would like to have Brown overruled so we could go back to separate but equal, so that we can segregate the races so long as each of the races is treated equally. So if you come over to testify at the House Judiciary Committee, you have to have, and you've got a couple of white staffers with you, then you need to have a couple of black staffers with you, separate but equal. That's where folks like Kamala Harris and what's Richmond's first name? Cedric Richmond, a congressman from Louisiana, a Democrat congressman from Louisiana. That's where they want to go. In fact, I think that's where most of the Democrats want to go. So if that's where you want to go, of course, we don't have any say in it because we don't have a member, that we don't vote for members in Congress that have votes. We do vote for members in Congress, but if you want to go to that same place, you want to go to Richmondville, then advise all of the people that you know in the states, you better vote Democrat so we can go back to this separate but equal idea, remembering that the Democrats embrace what's called identity politics, critical theory, critical race theory, which means that it doesn't matter what happened, it doesn't matter what the facts of a particular incident are. What you must do is you must examine the identity groups of the participants. And this is where you will find the truth. So there are different identity groups. There are blacks and there are Hispanics and there are homosexuals and on and on and on. All of whom would have you believe that they are the oppressed. And then there's another group that is always the oppressor. That would be white males, especially white Christian males, even worse, white Jewish males. So no matter what it looks like happened, no matter what the facts are, you always side against the oppressor and with the oppressed, just like Cedric Richmond said there. So if that's the kind of world that you want to live in, then the Democrats are the folks for you. Unfortunately, I kind of see a little bit of this on the next item on the card, which is Weir versus San Nicolas, and a star for, as you were, Weir versus Guam, and a star for San Nicolas. You're all aware that last night the House Administration Subcommittee on Elections had a hearing on voting rights in the territories. And this article that ran on PNC comes from that hearing. It says members of Congress representing the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Northern Marianas all testified in support of expanding voting rights to include the nearly 4 million who live in the U.S. territories. Here we go. 98% of whom are racial and ethnic minorities. This, of course, is the touchstone upon which the question must turn if you are a subscriber to identity politics. Also testifying was Neil Weir, president of Equally American, the only civil rights organization that advocates for residents of U.S. territories, Gwen Molinar, president of the League of Women Voters for the Virgin Islands, retired Virgin Islands educator Gerard Emanuel. Many individuals from the territories also submitted written testimony. And I predicted what was going to happen here, and as far as I can tell, it's exactly what happened. The folks that testified before this hearing engaged in the requisite righteousness preening and virtue signaling that talks in terms of American rights and soldiers and everything that happened and how, what a horrible thing it is that we can't vote in the territories and that the government should let us vote, darn it. So let's see, I've got Jesse on the line and I got another caller coming in here. I'm going to spend a little bit more time making my point here, Jesse, and then I'll get to you and the other callers. The ongoing disenfranchisement in U.S. territories is particularly concerning because of the undeniable connection it has to issues of race. Now, I'd like to know what the undeniable connection is to race between voting in the territories. Weir goes on to say, we cannot ignore the fact that by silencing citizens in the territories, we are silencing Americans who have long faced racism, systemic bias, and racial exclusion, Weir testified. Telling me that Weir really understands the rules of identity politics. So you heard my analysis yesterday about voting, people in the territories, the design of the Constitution, the fact that Congress doesn't have the ability to allow or prevent anyone from voting, that whole thing. But that's not good enough for Weir. Weir has to tie it to race. Silencing citizens who have long-faced racism, systemic bias, and racial exclusion. And this is just more of the same. So any objective look at the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the insular cases, or anything else is a waste of time, because what you look for is the identity groups. And Weir said the ongoing disenfranchisement in U.S. territories is particularly concerning because of the undeniable connection it has to issues of race in Neil Weir's mind. And that's why I carded this as Weir versus government of Guam. Now, later on, I'm going to get into San Nicolas's testimony and tell you how well we were served by Michael San Nicolas's testimony, and you already probably detected that I'm really disgusted with the testimony that Neil Weir, who doesn't live here, who has a savior complex that you heard about with respect to his litigation for American Samoa, people that don't want to be American citizens, and he raised some litigation in Utah that went against the people of American Samoa. But anyhow, let's see, I got Jesse and then Frenchie. So go for it, Jesse.
Hey, Bob, I was just wondering, you know, I got like two questions here, maybe. And first is, I don't know if you ever talked about that, the subject of where in the Constitution does it give the Congress to acquire new territories, and then also this voting rights. You were saying yesterday that you know, there's nowhere in the Constitution does it give Americans the right to vote. You know, it gives the people the right to bear arms and right to free speech and peaceful protest and all that other stuff, but not the right to vote.
Correct.
But and then in the Dave Davis case, he uses the because he was, I guess he was claiming that because he's not Chamorro, he used the 15th Amendment or whatever was favorable to him in that sense, you know. But then again, it just like, you know, we go back to you know, the self-determination thing, and it's like, you know, it just Congress just dropped. It's like they don't even want to do anything because in the Constitution it says that the Congress has makes all the needful rules that apply, you know, for the territories. So it's just like one big. I mean, when is the U.S. ever going to solve this problem? Because in reality, no matter how you look at it, we're all Americans. If you live on Guam and if you're born on Guam, you're American, you know. And these are legitimate questions. As an American, I want to vote for a president. You know, I may not like the fact that I'm living in a U.S. territory and I'm being penalized, but you know,
you're not being Jesse. You're not being penalized. But go on with your story.
I am being penalized because I don't want to move out of Guam.
Who imposed the penalty on you?
Okay, who chooses the political status for Guam?
Who imposed, Jesse? You said you were being penalized. Who imposed the penalty on you?
The fact that we are our political status, the political status that hangs over Guam as an unincorporated territory.
When I'm asking who imposed the penalty, that would be either a person or perhaps.
It would be the United States Congress because they have the power to determine the political status of the territories. You know, so in reality, they're locked.
Jesse, you got to Jesse. You have to slow down a little bit. This is a audience participated call-in show, and we don't permit soapboxing here. So, you know, you can make a point, and you and I will discuss it, and we'll go on, but you don't get to soapbox, okay?
Okay, whatever that means. I don't know what that means. But
you know what a soapbox is?
You know, yeah, soapbox. So what about it?
Okay, so you don't get to soapbox. No soapboxing means you don't get to have a soapbox in the trunk of your car, and every time you see a couple people standing on the street corner, you get the soapbox out and stand up and give a long lecture. So you and I can
kind of like so it's kind of like when you want the notion of when the U.S. came and they give chocolate out to everybody, right? Something like that.
Not even close. Not even close. Not even close. It's like this, Jesse. Jesse. Hey, Jesse. I shouldn't have to fight to get the floor on this talk show. So what I'm saying is, if you want to raise a point, we'll have a dialogue on the point. Okay? So which point do you want to address first? You started out with the 15th Amendment. You want to start there?
No, I didn't start out with that. I started out with the right. How do you say this? I started out with asking about the territory, the status, you know, of Guam, you know.
Okay, the territories.
And who gave Congress the power to acquire territories? It doesn't say anywhere in the Constitution about that, you know. It doesn't give anyone the power to acquire new territories.
Well, actually, it does, Jesse.
Where's that at? I haven't seen it.
Yeah, well, I have. I'm not turning my paces.
And that's why I was asking if you talked about that. But
I didn't.
Anyways,
but Jesse, okay, you're going to have time to make your points.
I don't have that much time, though. I don't want to take up all your time.
Well, you are taking up all my time.
Okay, so then I'll just call you back some other day then.
When you are taking up all my time, when your conversation is a stream of consciousness instead of the points that you want to make and allow me to address. Okay, it says a couple of points here in the Constitution. Let's see, I just had it here a second ago. Article 4, Section 3, new states may be admitted by the Congress into this union, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's Article 4, Section 3, first paragraph. Second paragraph, the Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or property belonging to the United States. So that's the constitutional framework for acquiring new territories, Jesse.
But it doesn't say acquired, though, right? In there?
Well, you have to be able to read it. It's like so many other things, like the 15th Amendment when we get to it. So if you want to hang on till after the break, I'll pick you up after the break.
Okay.
Okay?
That sounds good.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, launch! That's just what we did with our new state-of-the-art mobile banking app as we celebrate 66 years of serving our island communities. It's loaded with a ton of new user-friendly features, including remote deposit capture. It's another way of saying you don't have to come to the bank to go to the bank. And if you want to come to the bank, we're happy to see your smiling face as long as you wear a mask. And we don't have long lines. Bank Pacific Rosebud branches, we place roots, and we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Wow, nice smile. So perfect and all.
Thanks. I owe it all to Dr. Robert Yang and his smile team. They do wonders for a healthy, happy mouth.
Got teeth? Don't wait until they hurt. Schedule your routine checkup and cleaning with Dr. Yang and his smile team. Suite 119 in the East West Business Center, Upper Tumon. Call 647-8702 or 3.
The best thing that happened to teeth since toothpaste.
Dr. Yang and his smile team.
They make smiles happen.
Talk Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. They're open in Agotnia and ready for dine-in, takeout, and delivery services from Monday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. Call them at 479-2652 and get your Mescla fix today.
Still there, Jesse?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you want to go to the 15th Amendment next?
Well, that's what Dave Davis? I'm not too sure, but he used I think he used the 15th Amendment.
That's the one, yeah. This is what the 15th Amendment says. The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. So that doesn't give anybody the right to vote. It just says that if there is a vote, you can't stop people from doing it because of reasons of race, color, or previous condition of servitude.
Okay, so that's where I'm trying to get at.
Okay.
So if the U.S. can acknowledge that the people on Guam are a certain ethnic group, whether they're Chamorros or whatever, that became Americans, okay, and there is a vote to go that does go on in the United States, and all the other Americans get to, I mean, not all other, but a lot of Americans get to participate and vote for the president. So if you classify yourself as a Chamorro, a Black, Korean, or Asian, or whatever you Filipino or Palauan, but you're an American, can those people say, hey, are we being denied because of our ethnic background or our race, as an American? Could we make that argument,
I don't see what the argument is. Are you saying that if a state said you can't vote because you're Korean?
No, because because the people that are born on Guam, right? The people that are born on Guam are become U.S. citizens. Now, whether you're Chuukese or Chamorro, whatever, whatever ethnic, because your nationality is a U.S. citizen.
Yeah.
But you're gonna say, oh, but I'm descendants of Chamorro, or I'm descendant of whatever, or you could be African American. Now, Dave Davis said that he wasn't allowed to vote because it was a Chamorro only vote. Is that correct?
Close enough.
Yeah, right. So can Guam, the people on Guam or the Americans on Guam say, hey, are we not being allowed to vote because our race? Because in the apparently
Are you saying vote for president? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes, because in the insular cases they brought up something about alien races.
That's a myth. But let me just address
That's not a myth. That's been proven already.
Yeah. Well, for those who haven't read the insular cases, it's true. But I've read the insular cases, and it's not true. But let me go back to the 15th Amendment. So this is the argument that you want to make. You want to say that because the 15th Amendment says you can't deny someone his right to vote because of race, right? And people who are living on Guam are denied to vote for president. It's because of race?
Right, because the insular cases is tied to...
Let's hold on to the insular cases for a second. Is it because of race, or is it because the Constitution says that each state is entitled to as many electors as it has senators and representatives?
No, this is just about the race part about it,
Well, you won't find that in the Constitution, Jesse.
Well, that's what I mean. Is that's what I'm trying to say is Guam, like Puerto Rico, in the Treaty of Peace, they acknowledge that there's native inhabitants,
Yeah,
and those native inhabitants.
Of course, there were no native inhabitants in Puerto Rico because the Spanish had killed them all.
Right.
But there were native inhabitants in Guam.
What I'm just saying is in that document, so we can acknowledge that there are native inhabitants, Well,
there were in 1898.
Okay, well, I'm just saying that now that because when you fill out a form, even when you fill out a form to get a gun, it asks you, are you non-Hispanic, whatever, you have to check mark what you are, but in reality, I'm an American. Why should that matter? If I put U.S. citizen, why does it matter what I am, But in any case, am I being denied to vote for the president, or are the people living on Guam denied to vote because of our race?
No. No, you're not, Jesse. I don't get to vote for president. I've lived here since 1963. I only got to vote for president.
See, that's obvious.
Jesse, I only got to vote. Jesse, I only got to vote for president once in my life.
Okay.
And that's when I lived in one of the 50 states. But after I moved here, I could not vote for president. And I couldn't vote in the so-called plebiscite either, because the plebiscite violated the tenets of the 15th Amendment. So I don't like to use corny analogies like this, but what you're saying is I went to the store to buy an orange, and when I got home, I found out it had a red skin and a core and seeds inside of it. I got gypped. You're trying to compare apples and oranges. The fact that people living on Guam don't vote for president has got nothing to do with race. Any citizen living on Guam is eligible to vote for president if he lives in one of the 50 states. I explained yesterday that your political rights are functions of state citizenship. Your civil rights are primarily a function of federal citizenship. It's just that simple.
Right, and that's where I said that's where the penalty is that you're living on a U.S. territory. Why do I have to go move to the states to go vote as an American?
You're asking rhetorical questions that don't make any sense, Jesse. You're not being penalized.
Because you're not. But what I'm trying to say, Bob, is that it seems to me that your view is that we're all Americans and there's nothing wrong with being on an unincorporated territory. You know what I mean? And we should just because the fact that we live on an unincorporated territory, we should just accept that fact that we live here.
Well,
So
we should do with
We're
it.
not the ones who decided that to do that. To
You
keep our
know,
states
I
on
had
unincorporated territory.
I had a terrible experience when I woke up when I was 18 years old. I woke up one morning when I was living back in Wisconsin. I woke up and I washed my face and I said, I never got the right to self-determination. Horror of horrors.
But America goes there. I don't know. Like I said, man, I mean, I guess you just disagree on this because in reality, I believe that people, you may disagree that people shouldn't feel that way, but as a Chamorro person or descendant of a Chamorro, you know, it would seem that the reason why we're not being able to vote is because of our race. Now,
which is dead wrong.
Okay, but you can't fault people for feeling that way, can you?
I certainly can. If it's wrong, yeah. If you're wrong, you're wrong. It doesn't matter if it's your feelings or not.
Okay, so is it wrong that the U.S. is keeping Guam in an unincorporated status?
No. I got a break. I got a break for the halftime show,
Okay,
Jesse.
Thanks for that. I just wanted to get your
All right, thank you.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Discussions to end the federal presence. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. The Trump administration reportedly in talks with local and state officials in Portland, Oregon to reduce the number of federal officers who've been guarding federal property in the face of violent protests in Portland. That's provided local authorities can do the job. Donald Washington, director of the U.S. Marshals Service, is in Portland. He tells Fox News at Night.
I'm going to meet with members of the community over the next couple of days, members of the faith community, the business community, and others who are willing to talk about what next.
But Washington says violent extremists who've hijacked the protests are only interested in creating chaos. The protests continuing for a 62nd straight night. Portland's mayor contends the presence of federal law enforcement officers has triggered more protests. A contentious hearing on Capitol Hill yesterday as Attorney General William Barr appeared before the House Judiciary Committee.
Lawmakers peppered the Attorney General with questions about the Portland protests, racism, and President Trump's commuting of the prison sentence of friend Roger Stone. But House Democrats spent a lot of time interrupting Bill Barr. Justice Department spokesperson Carrie Kupak tells Fox's Hannity
they would refuse to let him answer those questions.
Meanwhile, Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell tells Fox's The Story with Martha McCallum.
The Attorney General doesn't need an ice cream cone before he sits down.
No, but he needs to be allowed to answer the question.
He's a big boy.
Barr said he expects Russia to try to interfere in the upcoming election. In Washington, Jill Nato, Fox News.
The CEOs of some of the biggest tech companies will appear before the House Judiciary Committee today as it wraps up a year-long investigation of how they dominate the market. Apple's Tim Cook, Sundar Pichai of Google, Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg, and Amazon's Jeff Bezos will all appear remotely before the committee. America is listening to Fox News.
Family Finance has been serving the people of Guam since 1959, and they'll continue to be there for you in the years to come. Whether you're looking to get a personal loan for that summer staycation or paying off those long overdue bills, Family Finance has got you covered. Apply for a personal loan from $1,000 up to $3,900 by calling Family Finance. Hagåtña 475-4545, Upper Tumon at 647-5626, or in Dededo at 633-4473. Family Finance, serving the people of Guam since 1959.
Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Hagåtña is taking your local favorite dishes and serve them with extra flair. Mezcla is ready to serve you and your family for your dine-in experience and takeout services. To ensure everyone's safety and comfort, Team Mezcla has taken further steps in maintaining a clean and sanitized area for you and your family while dining in. For more information, please call 479-2652 or 479-2653. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
An experimental coronavirus vaccine showing early signs of success in monkeys.
Moderna began phase 3 of its clinical trials of its potential coronavirus vaccine this week, making use of 30,000 human test subjects. But the company and federal health officials reveal the formula appears to work in non-human primates. Researchers gave 2 rounds of the vaccine to rhesus macaque monkeys exposed to SARS coronavirus number 2, the virus causing COVID-19, and they observed the animal's immune system respond. The virus was rapidly controlled in the monkeys' respiratory systems using both high and low doses of the vaccine. 4 weeks later, the monkeys were re-exposed to the virus, but no virus could be detected in the monkeys' lungs 7 times out of 8. Eben Brown, Fox News.
The federal government blaming Russian intelligence for spreading false information about the coronavirus outbreak.
Previously classified information obtained by the Associated Press says 3 English-language websites are spreading disinformation about the coronavirus pandemic. Between late May and early July, one official told the AP 3 websites published about 150 articles about the pandemic, some of which propped up Russia and denigrated the U.S. 2 Russians with roles in Moscow's military intelligence service have been identified as directing the disinformation at American audiences. In Washington, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
The Trump administration issuing new rules for DACA recipients, cutting in half the renewal period for people already sheltered from deportation, and also closing out new applications. Last month, the Supreme Court refused to uphold the administration's attempts to end the program, saying it hadn't followed proper procedures. After a down day on Wall Street Tuesday, Asian stock markets closing Wednesday mixed. Dow futures are trading slightly lower. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
You've got a job to do. Having the right equipment for the job is critical, and East West Rental has the exact tools you need. Get it done faster with the right stuff, whether it's landscaping tools, concrete tools, lifts, trucks, lights, generators, trench boxes, welders, tents, tables, and chairs. They're here to help you tackle any project you're working on, big or small. Open Monday to Saturday, 7 to 5, closed Sundays. Find what you're looking for at East West Rental Center in Upper Tumont or call 646-1463.
Hofady, this is Kayla from APL Guam. Here at APL, our expertise and extensive network can help you grow your business and reach out to more markets. As a responsible carrier, APL is also committed to a sustainable future, whether it's protecting the environment or investing our efforts in giving back to the community. Our dedicated team in Guam and the U.S. mainland are here to support you. Call 588-4651 or visit apl.com.
Woo-wee! Just take a gander at them tender and juicy fall-off-the-bone St. Louis ribs. Heavens to Betsy! What is their secret? It's bursting with so much flavor, I can eat them all day long. Come see for yourself, y'all. These fine slabs of hunky-dory, mouth-watering ribs are only available at Circle K. Circle K. Take it easy.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
So here we are again after that big halftime show that we've all learned to love so much. Second half of Tall Tales, I got Frenchie and our Carl in the green room just waiting for their opportunity to come on stage. Ask that you be a little patient, our Carl and Frenchie. I just want to recap a couple of things that happened during the first half. First of all, soapboxing. I listen to other talk shows, not because I think they're so good, but because sometimes I like to have some noise in the background. And other talk show hosts tolerate soapboxing, which means someone gets on the line and for 6 or 7 minutes lays out their particular rap without interruption, without any dialogue with the host or whatever, usually at a rather elevated level of volume. We don't allow soapboxing here on Tall Tales. The game is open for everyone, and I'll talk about just about anything you want to talk about, but we'll talk with one another about it. You don't get to grab the microphone and commandeer the show because you want to talk over the host. As I mentioned to Jesse, I should never have to fight to get the floor on my own talk show. So soapboxing, that's my way of explaining perhaps a term that is not so generally understood anymore, but to be on a soapbox means that you have a lecture that you want people to hear. So you go to places like Pershing Square in San Francisco, or there's a place in Hyde Park, I think, in London, where people go and they stand and they make speeches, and people who are interested gather around and listen to the speech. In order to make sure that people see you, you might bring a soapbox along and stand on that soapbox. Well, if you want a soapbox, fine, but not on Tall Tales. Tall Tales is an interactive audience participation show, not a karaoke talk show host where you get to grab the mic and sing any song that you want to, off key, as loud as you want. That's one thing I wanted to recap a little bit. The second thing is this, that I think Jesse is an example of where identity politics can take an otherwise reasonable person. Remember, the definition of identity politics is that you deal with all situations in terms of identity groups. What the facts are, what happened, etc., don't make any difference. It's identity politics. Well, Jesse's identity politics is, well, he can't vote for president. He's being punished, and he's being punished because he's Chamorro. I suppose that works pretty good if we're looking for demagoguery, but it is not logical. The reason that people who are living on Guam can't vote is because of the way the United States Constitution is set up. All of the political rights in the United States are functions of state citizenship. Living in a state means you get to vote for president, means you got 2 senators, means you got 1 member of the House of Representatives. That's how it works. And this system was dreamed up in 1789. I suspect the people that dreamed it up didn't even know there was an island of Guam, much less Chamorros. But that's the way the system was designed. The United States decided to become an imperial power in 1898. And my theory is because the United States wanted to be like everybody else, wanted to have an empire. So using the revolution in Cuba as a pretext, the United States took over the Philippines. And as a part of the Philippine colonization, the United States also grabbed Guam, not because of the Chamorros, but because it made a convenient coaling station. And my sense is that Guam would have been just as valuable to the United States had there been no people living here at all than if there were people living here. Geopolitics. Geopolitics is, I suppose some people look at it and say, well, when you analyze things that way, it sounds so hard-hearted. Geopolitics is pretty hard-hearted, but that's the way it is. So the United States grabbed the Philippines, Guam, Puerto Rico, decided it didn't want Cuba, and this was a hotly contested issue around the turn of the last century. Probably pretty close to half the people in the United States did not want the United States to be an imperialist country. Obviously, more did than didn't. So a series of matters were litigated that came before the Supreme Court of the United States that are called the insular cases. And I've found that people really like to talk about the insular cases, and their willingness to advance the insular cases as a point in their argument is inversely proportional to the time they actually spent reading the insular cases, because nobody reads the insular cases. But the two major insular cases, DeLima versus Bidwell and Downs versus Bidwell, dealt with oranges and bananas, not who gets to vote. Bidwell was a collector of customs for the city of New York. I can't remember who was oranges and who was bananas. DeLima wanted to import bananas into New York, the port of New York. Bidwell wanted to charge him a customs duty. There was litigation all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said Puerto Rico is not a foreign country, therefore no duty can be charged. The next case was, that's DeLima. The next case was Downs versus Bidwell. I think Downs wanted to bring in oranges. But by that time, the United States had passed an organic act for Puerto Rico called the Foraker Act. And the Foraker Act said that a customs in half the ordinary rate would lie against imports from Puerto Rico. And when that got to the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court said, yes, that's okay for stuff coming from the territory or coming from Puerto Rico, because the uniformity clause of the United States Constitution does not apply to these insular possessions. Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution, the Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, but they shall be uniform throughout the United States. So the Supreme Court said that clause does not apply to these insular acquisitions. In the process of doing it, they said the U.S. Constitution does not apply ex proprio vigere. Now, you may say that that is really bad constitutional law, but that's what the insular cases say. They were commercial cases driven by commercial interests. Because of that ruling, we spent a lot of time with Article 4, Section, Article 4, Section 3, Paragraph 2 of the United States Constitution, which says the Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property belonging to the United States. In the beginning, this was the Northwest Territory, but courts have held that clause applies to all territory acquired by the United States. So Congress has the ability to make rules and regulations. The Constitution does not apply of its own force. Our Organic Act contains the important features of the Bill of Rights. In 1968, Congresswoman Patsy Mink added an amendment to the elective governor bill, which we refer to as the Mink Amendments, which say that that Articles 1 through 9 of the bill of the amendments, to the extent that they didn't apply, now apply to the territory of Guam. So we got the full panoply of the Bill of Rights, but we don't vote because we don't live in states. It's got nothing to do with what your race is. If you want to play the race card, you look at the 15th Amendment, which says you can't deny a person's right to vote in an election because of race, if there is an election. And there was an election here, and the Guam government decided we are going to only allow a particular race to vote in that election, violative of the 15th Amendment. What can be done about all this stuff? You could go to Congress and ask the Congress to change the Organic Act to allow that kind of a plebiscite. You could go to Congress and ask Congress, please do a plebiscite and do it this way or do it that way. You can go to Congress and say, please let Congress be independent. But you got to remember, Jesse, and those of you who have subscribed so dearly to identity politics, that you are living in a territory created by what you call the colonizer. The territory of Guam was created by a federal statute. So if you think that it makes sense to use something created by your colonizer to move forward towards statehood or anything else, you're not thinking very clearly. If the Chamorros, if there is an identity group called Chamorros that could be pulled together, if they're for independence, then they should petition Congress for independence. Leave me out of it. I don't want to live in an independent Guam. I want to live in Guam that's part of the American family. I think we can improve our lot in the American family. We're not ever going to be able to vote for president or for members, voting members of Congress. Now, it's unfortunate, but, you know, the way out of that, Jesse, and people of that ilk, is ask Congress to make Guam an independent country. Okay, so that's kind of the recap I wanted to put on my little chat with Jesse. Let's see, I've got Frenchie on line 2 and R. Carl on line 3. Good afternoon, Frenchie.
Well, good afternoon, Bob. Thank you for the lesson. I'm afraid it falls on dead ear with the crowd you were lecturing, but yeah, you almost both brought Ray's record. I was afraid my batteries are going to run out.
Sorry, Frenchie.
No problem. 40 minutes, Ray was 45, so he beats you by 5 minutes.
All right.
What I wanted to talk about was the health crisis, quote unquote. I won't do the today, but it looks like we have a fight that's brewing and getting more and more nasty by the day between Dr. Shea and the governor's medical advising board, whoever those people are. But there are some pretty strong words being exchanged. And then today on the national level, it was interesting because yesterday we had on the social media, there was a consortium of medical doctors that went to Congress and basically was calling off the CDC and a lot of the decision maker within the national state about their policy of isolation, about their choice of medication for the treatment of the Wuhan virus, and specifically hydroxychloroquine or chloroquine, I don't know the American way of saying it, which has been considered by most of social media as a fake story, which is quite interesting because it has been also a very controversial story back in France where actually the head of the teaching hospital in Marseille, which is the third largest city in France, has been treating all these patients with hydroxychloroquine and also adding zinc and all those things. So basically it's an antiviral drug that is almost 70 years old, which I personally took a pill every morning while I was in Africa because it's It's an anti-paludism medicine, and you can have it as a preventive measure, and I never suffer any side effect like what a lot of those big government advocates are saying. But basically what came out of it in France was that Professor Raoult was being attacked for pushing that medicine because Big Pharma didn't like his approach, because Big Pharma doesn't like having a drug that is cheap, efficient, and costs very little to produce. They want to be able to get drugs they can charge $50 or $60 per pill rather than 50 cents. So it's been very interesting. And then in the U.S., Trump and of course several other countries, several people have used that medicine to treat the virus. Trump has been a big supporter. So yesterday he jumped on the bandwagon of those doctors and said, well, I'm glad you guys came out. And right away, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter started censoring all those videos of those doctors who were quite eloquent and quite precise on how they advocated their support of the drug, and also were questioning some of the statistics that the CDC is coming with. And so that brings us back to our little island and how it has been managed here on Guam. And basically, Dr. Shea, who also happens to be the president of the Guam Medical Association, was attacking the governor's medical advising board and saying their statistics are fudge, and their medical models are basically belonging with Looney Tunes on Cartoon Day, you know. And so I think it's going to be interesting to watch what comes out of this, because a lot of the governor's decision regarding reopening Guam and so on is based on that. And Dr. Shea was also very critical of the test we're using to find positive people, explaining that you can be positive because you were infected 3-4 months ago, and that if somebody has been found positive, we should do a viral count and try to find out if people actually have developed antibodies, because then it wouldn't fit in the category of that the government is putting them into. So very, very fascinating fight. It's evident Big Pharma and Deep State do not like that approach, and as you pointed many times, we are in an election year, and it's interesting to see what happens. I thought it was funny, by the way, that Jesse forgot to mention the people residing on Guam. Also, whites were not part of the thing. I mean, even though we're only 7 or 8% of the population, it's funny how how things work in the psyche of people, that they basically put you out of the picture to push their agenda. So, but yeah, I was more focused on the health issue. I don't know if you followed it at all or not at all, but it's interesting that we see a battle brewing here. Especially Dr. Shea has been very much in touch with his colleagues in Taiwan, who happen to be the country in the world which has had the most efficient way of tracing people that have been infected, treating them, and preventing. So they haven't had any infection in 3 months, for example.
So Frenchie, it's Shea versus the governor's medical advisory group?
Yeah.
I can see it on the card already.
Okay.
And my ruling would be that anything that provides for good talk radio can't be all bad.
Okay, that sounds good. It sounds good. Yeah, I think it will be a developing story. We'll see that. I'm going to let Carl put his grain of salt on everything here.
Thank you very much, Francie. Good talking.
And I see the real Joe Cruz is also added Carmen to the Bolero.
A comment.
Carmen, the opera.
Oh, okay.
Bizet's opera. Yeah, he did that in the previous break.
Okay.
He's getting very cultured.
He is indeed. It's his association with Tall Tales that does it,
I
Frenchie.
think that must be what it is, yes.
Good talking to you,
All right.
Frenchie. So long. Okay, so 7th inning stretch.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Are you fed up with those long bank lines? You wish you had a bank who gave you faster service? Well, by enrolling in Bank Pacific's new mobile app, you don't even need to wait in line. But even if you do want to come down in person, we're more than happy to see your smiling face, as long as you have a mask. Because our service is so good, we don't believe in lines. Because for 66 years, we've been making sure you get the service you deserve. Because where others put branches, we place roots. And we're rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Horizon Properties, doing real estate since 1978, 14 years here on Guam. Call Maria Miller from Horizon Properties at 777-7792.
So here we are, 7th inning stretch, Wrigley Field, Chicago, Illinois. And now we're back at the heroic studios of Tall Tales here on Upper Tumum. I just want to go back to Neil Weir for a minute to reset the stage here for this part of the program, and then I'll go to Jimmy and our Carl. This is what Neil Weir said. The ongoing disenfranchisement in U.S. territories, disenfranchisement, wrong choice of words, in U.S. territories is particularly concerning because of the undeniable connection it has to issues of race. We cannot ignore the fact that by silencing citizens in the territories, we are silencing Americans who have long faced racism, systemic bias, and racial exclusion. Weir testified. Then he goes on to say, we ask Congress to act so that citizens in the territories can finally vote and have their voices heard. It's the right thing to do, the moral thing to do, and in 2020, it's long overdue. Now, Neil Weir is a lawyer. He's a smart guy. And he knows that there's nothing that Congress can do about enfranchising. You can't be disenfranchised unless you've been enfranchised. We've never been enfranchised here. But Weir knows for sure that that there's nothing that Congress can do about voting for Congress or the president. He knows that. But he's got to do the identity politics thing here, systemic bias, racial exclusion, racism. You know, I wish that, you know, he would not help us anymore, because I don't think that kind of help really helps us at all. It's probably, you know, it's probably something that the Jessies of the island thrive on, and that's another story. But let me go to, let's see, I've got our Carl and then Michael. Starting out with our Carl. Jimmy, you can call back maybe right after the home stretch. Okay, our Carl, go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple of thoughts to what Jesse was saying, you know, that, and we keep having to repeat this, I think we all do, that as far as voting, I mean, there's supposed to be more Chamorros in the mainland than there are in Guam. I've heard that repeatedly, and it's probably true. So we've got tens of thousands of Chamorros that are voting right now. I mean, do they, by moving to the States, become first-class citizens? They were second-class citizens here, but moving there, they become second-class citizens. There's tens of millions of blacks, Latinos, Pacific Islanders that vote for president. So if this is some scheme to prevent people of color, as they say, from voting, it's really a lousy scheme because it's not working. There's millions of people of all different races and ethnicities that vote for all kinds of elections all across the states.
Did you notice, though, that Jesse has really picked up on the identity politics approach? It's not only that he can't vote for president, he's being punished. Do you feel like you're being punished? You probably should be punished, Carl, but nothing to do with voting. I'm sure there are other reasons for which you would deserve punishment. But do you think that not being able to vote serves as a punishment for you?
In this present setup, no, I don't.
Well, I tried to bring him around. Well, who is it that's punishing you? But that's the identity politics. It's the oppressor that's punishing you, and there's no punishment here unless back in 1789, the people that put the Constitution together when they added Article 4, Section 3, said, "We'll show that guy Jesse out there. We'll set it up so we can punish him."
Yeah, it's just the way the rules of the game were set up, and they weren't considering skin color or anything. It's just it really clarified for me when I read something that explained it as the presidential election is not really one huge election. It's 50 small ones. And each of those elections has a certain number of electors at stake for the Electoral College. So those electors go and they actually do the electing of the president. We don't actually vote for the president, not directly anyway. So that really clarified it for me. I didn't quite understand how this worked, but that simplified it, and it made a lot of sense to me. So if Neil Weir was really serious, he should deal with the issue of somehow making electors up for grabs. Because other than that, even if we were given the right to vote today, or tomorrow, at midnight, 12:01, we were given the right to vote, it would be meaningless because we have no electors at stake. It wouldn't mean anything.
Well,
other than maybe a symbolic vote or a straw poll or something, it really wouldn't amount to anything.
Well, and that's why I'm hard on him, because he knows better. And to say, we ask the Congress to act so that citizens in the territories can finally vote, he knows better than that. Anybody, certainly any lawyer knows that, and anybody who spent any time reading the Constitution knows that you can't have an act of Congress that says starting tomorrow, people in Guam can vote for 2 senators and 1 member of the House. It just doesn't work that way. He knows that. So he leads in with the identity politics, and then he winds up with something that he knows is just dead wrong. Well, what would be the purpose of such a thing? And I ascribe it to demagoguery.
Yeah, it's a useful tool. And I'll just add one last thing before I get off the line. There's this talk about, the colonizing and colonizer and how United States is such a terrible, empire builder and all this. But there's several examples, and I'll bring up 2 that show that the United States is really not that interested in building an empire. One of them is right after World War II, when we had basically completely defeated our enemies. We defeated Germany, we defeated Japan. We could have very easily taken over their countries and any of their colonies, that they still had left, which I don't think they had any left at that point. But we actually went in and helped them to rebuild. We didn't asked for reparations because they could never repay. The damage was just too humongous. So that was an opportunity we had to vastly expand the American empire if we really, really wanted to. And we turned it down. We went in and we actually helped to rebuild our enemies, people who had killed, millions and millions and millions, over 70 million people died in that war. The second example is Texas, and I was really fascinated to listen to an interview of someone who had a knowledge of the history of Texas, and you can help clarify this. But we had actually, in the Mexican-American War, or the American, whatever the name of the war was, we had actually captured the capital of Mexico. We could have taken the entire country if we wanted to.
And there were some in the government that said that's what we should do, but fortunately, cooler heads prevailed.
Yeah, that particular territory that comprised Texas was actually there was a lot of people who came from early America and went westward and went into what I don't know if it was called Texas at the time, what it was called, but they were invited by the leader of Mexico, who was a pretty cruel guy. He was really pretty brutal, but Texas was comprised of territory that was extremely, extremely hard to settle because of the Apaches and the Comanches, some of the fiercest Indian tribes, the Plains Indians, to ever be in the American West. I mean, they were really brutal. So Santa Anna invited in these people, said, come in and stake out, what you want, and we'll give you that land. Just settle it and, deal with the Indians. So that was all that America wanted. They just wanted that northern portion because that was where the Americans were, and they had rebelled against Santa Anna.
Well, you remember now, Texas declared its independence from Mexico in 1836 and became the independent Republic of Texas. In 1845, Texas annexed the United States. Now, some people think that the United States annexed Texas, but them folks ain't Texas.
Yeah, I believe Texans would agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but anyway, those are just two examples that shows we're really terrible empire builders. We could have owned all of Mexico, and when the Texas was eventually made a state, any Mexicans who wanted to live in Texas and were there instantly became citizens. There was no waiting period. All those people there became American citizens. Anyway, just a little bit of history I wanted to toss in. Thanks for letting me chime in a bit.
Okay, Carl. Good talking to you. So we've got Michael in the green room. We'll go to Michael next. And then, let's see, I've got Carlo on the line. Good afternoon, Michael.
Hi, Bob. Yes, I was fascinated to hear that you're talking about Neil Weir today. He's got a case going to the Supreme Court fairly soon. And it's a very interesting and exciting case. He represents some American Samoans. The ironic is that the country, the island of American Samoa, and most of all the residents of American Samoa do not want his representation. They actually filed briefs opposing his notion. And his notion is that the 14th Amendment says that everyone born in the territories of the United States are instant U.S. citizens. And as you know, in these territorial cases, the Supreme Court, 1901 or so, kind of arbitrarily just said unincorporated territories, I never saw that term in the Constitution, those people do not qualify for the 14th Amendment treatment. And so he's challenging that, saying, no, that they should. American Samoans who are born in American Samoa are American nationals, not American citizens. They can easily become a citizen, and the reason for that is they want to maintain their tribal status. They want to maintain a status of where they can choose their leadership, not through democracy, but through clan-based. What's fascinating about this is if he should win and have the Supreme Court declare the 14th Amendment. What that means is that everybody born in a territory is automatically a U.S. citizen. The interesting part is it's going to create about maybe 100 to 150 million new Americans.
Well, I followed that quite closely, and he won his case in Utah, much to the chagrin of the government of American Samoa. But my analysis is that if he is correct on the law, then everyone born in the Philippines prior to the 4th of July, 1946, it was a U.S. citizen by birth.
Correct, and their children would then also be entitled.
Under some circumstances, yeah, the children
I believe if your parents were American citizens, you have the right to apply. I mean, they'd have to do some fast changing of laws.
You would be a citizen, but there is a residence requirement that you have to live in the United States for a certain number. But those people would be, yeah. So we'd have a lot of new American citizens.
So it kind of creates because I always like to explain to people in the States, and they always freak out when I explain to them, I am a natural-born American. In other words, when I was born on Guam, I was automatically an American citizen. I can run for president of the United States. However, I am not a 14th Amendment American.
I always make the point that it's a distinction without a difference. But go on, Michael.
Well, hypothetically, like the state of Georgia could pass a law discriminating against me, and I couldn't call for the 14th Amendment, like they would want to discriminate against a Guamanian.
Yeah.
So just a funny point. Okay, that's all.
Very interesting. Thanks for calling, Michael. Okay, we're coming down the home stretch here. I've got Carlo in the green room, and I've also got Pete in the green room. I hope I can cover you both before the end of the show.
Everyone has a busy schedule these days, and sometimes we forget to schedule our routine dental checkup and cleaning. Don't neglect your dental health. Schedule one today with Dr. Robert Yang and his Smile team, conveniently located at the East West Business Center on Marine Drive, Upper Tumon. Call us today at 647-8702 or 3. Again, that's 647-8702 or 647-8703. We make smiles happen.
Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro in Hagåtña is taking your local favorite dishes and serve them with extra flair. Mezcla is ready to serve you and your family for your dine-in experience and takeout services. To ensure everyone's safety and comfort, Team Mezcla has taken further steps in maintaining a clean and sanitized area for you and your family while dining in. For more information, please call 479-2652 or 479-2653. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 66 years.
So here we are, home stretch, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky. The horses are off and running, and it's Carlo in the stretch. Good afternoon, Carlo.
Hi, good afternoon. How are you doing today?
Good. What can you tell me, Carlo?
Well, I'm hoping what can you tell me? I have a common question for clarity and maybe even enlightenment. You're all talking about voting for president and all like that. I guess that the comment would be, if I'm not mistaken, I've heard relative to first class, second class, if John Smith from Kennebunkport, Maine, moved to Guam and became a resident of Guam, likewise, Joe Cruz moves to Kennebunkport, Maine, and becomes a resident in Maine, one would not be able to vote versus the other would because of the residence, not because of the type of citizenship necessarily. The question would be, as it was that many years ago when the argument was made, taxation without representation and the ability to vote for president and to act accordingly, would that kind of apply here because we have no taxation would be kind of the basis why the territories don't have representation?
The
Clarity and enlightenment, please.
The territories don't have representation because of the way the Constitution is designed. Representation is a function of state citizenship. So your political rights are functions of state citizenship. Guam is not a state, therefore it does not have 2 members in the House or 2 members in the Senate or member in the House or representation in the Electoral College, because that's the way the Constitution is designed. If Guam became a state, then it would have all the rest of the stuff, but it's only states that have representation. The fact that we don't pay taxes is an interesting but inconsequential fact, Carlo.
Yes, very, very interesting. But, you know, on that basis, as would be the states, and I forgot what state that was then, their issue was they were being taxed, but they didn't have representation in the Congress, so that kind of flipped it. But yes, that's understood. And then that gives me that question. If one of the trade-offs, if you will, not being made a state, but will allow you representation in the House and the Senate, as well as the voting opportunity for president. Oh, but by the way, that's going to come with taxation. Are we willing to do that? But then the other side, my other question was, would that be correct when I said when John Smith moves and now resides in Guam, because of his residency, he would not be able to vote for president? But I do understand, because I know of some residents of Guam who have moved to the mainland and are residents of a particular state, they are able to vote for president.
Exactly. Yeah, it's because residence in a state is where your political rights come from.
So then it would not necessarily mean that I, a Chamorro, or resident of Guam, is necessarily second class. It's just particularly because of where I currently reside that I'm not able to vote for president, as opposed to, I've heard some say discrimination and all like that. Because I could do that. I could move to California, establish residency, and I vote for president.
Or if you were me, you could move from Wisconsin to Guam 57 years ago and never vote again.
Exactly.
It's the way it works.
Thank you, Bob.
Nice
Appreciate
talking.
You. Have a good day.
Nice talking to you, Carlo.
All right.
Okay, so then I've got Pete, and then after that we get to the heart of the menu, Jimmy. Good afternoon, Pete.
Hey, Uncle Bob, how are you doing?
Good. Could you repeat that question?
How are you doing, Uncle Bob?
Yeah, okay, repeat.
So just to add a couple of caveats to the immediately previous discussion, someone who lives in the States or who lived in the state and moved to Guam could do things to maintain their state residency, such as never register to vote on Guam and maintain property in the state, and they can vote absentee, even if they live the rest of their life here on Guam.
No,
as long as they maintain.
I'm gonna argue with you, Pete. That's not correct.
But if they maintain property or business out there in the state such that they can still remain a state resident.
They wouldn't be able to remain a state resident if they didn't live in the state. You could.
But if they go back every once in a while, and I'm sure there's a way that they can maintain that state connection. Just because I've seen people do it, maybe they're doing it illegally or wrongly, but it's been done.
Well, it comes down to this. You are a resident of the place where you live, and there's a lot
where you're domiciled, yes.
There's a lot of jiggling that can be done with the word live. but
Right.
and a lot of legal fictions that people can indulge in. But that's the test, where you live.
Right, right. And then vice versa, or not vice versa, but a different caveat. If you're one of those American Samoan nationals, you don't automatically get to vote once you get to the States. You have to get naturalized, and they have a fast track for that. That was one of the points in the case that Neil Weir tried, was that, look, leave American Samoa alone. If they want to move to the States, they don't have to wait the 5 years like everybody else. They can do it in 3 months.
You know, I had a poster on Facebook one time who accused Neil Weir of having a savior complex, Pete.
That was me.
Ah.
Yeah, it's saviorism. That was the point that I was going to make. Is, you know, this is an exercise in saviorism. And one of the characteristics, or one of the unfortunate things about saviorism, is that the savior, the would-be savior, the crusader, you know, doesn't understand the full ramifications of the body politic that gets affected by his acts of saviorism. And you're seeing that, you know, play out with American Samoa, and here on Guam there are ramifications. You know, the self-determination argument or issue is confusing enough as it is. Add this to it, and it just gets more confusing.
Well, you can understand my chagrin when I saw what Weir's testimony was before Congress.
Yes.
And I'm personally embarrassed. I don't want someone to run into somebody the next time in the States and say, "Oh, you're from Guam? Isn't that where that guy Weir came and testified about how racist things are in Guam and how bad, you know?" I wish
I don't know where he come from.
Yeah, I hope that he doesn't see the necessity to help us anymore, Pete.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I've been saying this. It's been misguided since he was, when it first started out as We the People. I thought the courts were the wrong place to go because it's a political question. And then now that he's fighting it from the other front, which is, you know, that's a strategy. You fight it from multiple fronts, right?
Yeah.
But you've made out a lot of points that, you know, he probably hadn't thought of, or still wants to try to overcome, about, you know, the constitutionality of what he's trying to get done, or the lack of constitutionality of what he's trying to get done. But the bottom line for me is that he is supplanting his personal crusade, you know, for 4 million people. And it's unequally American for one person to try to push his agenda on everybody else.
So
and,
he has taken over a crusade dealing with 4 million people, all in the name of self-determination, right, Pete?
Well, his determination, one person's self-determination.
Right.
And then going towards or talking about the testimony, I really liked the testimony of the representative from Puerto Rico. She made some very cogent points, some very poignant points, and then our congressman got on and he rambled about some other things that was not necessarily relevant to the issue. But then most of all, the impression I was left with is that he was really there advocating for Puerto Rico.
It kind of seemed like it.
Statehood.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was my take on it. But
okay.
I just wanted to throw my little bit of 2.5 cents in there.
Well, your 2.5 cents is always a very valuable addition to Tall Tales, Pete, so thanks for calling.
Yeah, and we'll see where this goes.
Okay. So long. Okay, and then finally, the highlight of the program, the legendary, the one and only, Jimmy.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, Jimmy.
Hello. Yeah, got 2 points. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, Jimmy.
Yeah, well, I got 4 points, but there's only time for 2.
All right.
The first one, I'm speculating the reason why Jesse called today, because he didn't call every day, he didn't call all the time.
Right.
But today is Michael Bavacqua's birthday.
Ah.
And you know, if they have a birthday party, they get all worked up.
I suspect that that'll be a national holiday for the Democratic People's Republic of Guahan, right? Michael Bavacqua's birthday.
Yeah. Anyways, today, so... And the other thing is, the second point, is that there's no such thing as a full-blooded chamorro.
Okay.
Because when the Spanish came, they killed the men, they raped the women. And then the Filipinos came and they did... Yeah, you show me any Guam politician that is not chamorro Pino.
I hear what you're saying, Jimmy.
So, been colonized both ways. First by the Spanish, then by the Americans, then by the Filipinos.
Yeah, well, you know, I wonder where the Spanish went in this. I see a lot of Spanish names, you know, like our governor. Yeah. Anyhow, Jimmy, I gotta go. Nice talking to you, buddy.
Bye-bye.
I think we probably better come back to this topic tomorrow. There seems to be a lot of interest, so we'll lead off tomorrow with Weir versus the people of Guam. See you then.